Now let's move to the next question. Discuss the objectives of the disinvestment and analyze the recent policy of the disinvestment. So we have to discuss the objectives and then analyze the recent policy of the disinvestment. So here, okay, you can talk about either the disinvestment in a definition format, or you can say government has recently in its budget proposed some extra amount of money as a disinvestment target. In this context, disinvestment has been very important. Or else government with this agenda of taking the role as a facilitator. Okay, government want to just to be a facilitator. Okay, there is no business for the government to stay in the business. It is not the government business. Government job is to become a facilitator for the business. So because of this thing, government is increasingly moving towards the disinvestment and the privatization. This can also be an introduction. Okay, so disinvestment defined as action of government selling or liquidating an asset or subsidiary started after 1951 with an impact of the LPG era. So what are the objectives? The objectives are to reduce the financial burden of the government, to introduce the competition and market discipline. Same simple objectives. So I'm here nothing much to explain. To improve the public finances, to encourage the wider shape, or to de-politicize non-essential services. So that's what, right, before 1990s what we have seen public sector led approach, but this public sector led model, it is difficult for the government. Now the government is doing, let's say government is managing police also, managing law and order also, checking the environment also. Now the government is also handling this steel company also, so it becomes very difficult. Okay, when the government is involved, these public sector companies, what is the purpose? Okay, the job of the government or the public sector companies is there would be some kind of social objective is always associated with it. Though there are some public sector companies like say Mini Ratna, Navaratna and Maharatna, where the government is giving good amount of freedom for these PSUs, still the government cannot stop itself from interfering in these PSUs. There are various PSUs, there is difference in the functioning of these PSUs. Okay, few PSUs work as a completely department of the government. Like say they are railways, it is generally the directly department of the government. Okay, there are certain PSUs, okay, let's say ONGC, okay, they are like kind of corporations. They are registered under the Companies Act. Companies Act, they will have certain kind of chairman, board of directors, shareholders. So they have to work like normally like a kind of company. Okay, but still not every company has been given the autonomous freedom. Okay, because they are always government kind of interference will be there. Same is happening even with your public sector banks. Ministry of Finance will always interfere with the banks. Sometimes they will talk of loan waivers. Sometimes they will increase the priority sector lending norms, or else such kind of things will keep happening. And because of this thing, we have also seen the non-performing assets. So in order to reduce this burden of the government, okay, let's say what is the necessity government will feel? Okay, let's say already Tata is producing the steel. Why should government stay in this steel? It is wasting a lot of energy. Let's use that thing, use that money, sell off those assets. Okay, let's say Visakhapatnam steel plant. Let's sell off those assets and use that money to develop the port facilities where the investment is not coming up, or else use this money to invest in the infrastructure, like say roads, rural roads, where the private sector investment is not coming. This is the intention. Now for that to happen, government does not have the money, right? So if you sell off these assets, government will get the money. And most of there is no business for the government for staying in the business also. That is also another point. And it will depoliticize the issues. Unnecessary interference of the involvement of the government will not be there. Okay, so these are the objectives. I hope the things are clear. To reduce the financial burden of the government, to improve public finances, to introduce competition and market discipline, to fund growth, to encourage wider share of ownership, to depoliticize the non-essential services. Now this is a major question. Recent policy on the disinvestment. Now this has led to some kind of controversy also. The new public sector policy of 2021 was announced as a part of reforms introduced. Okay, in the 2021 budget they have announced this thing. In this they said, okay, we will divide now the public sector companies into the strategic sector and the non-strategic sector. These strategic sectors are identified based on the criteria such as national security, energy security, infrastructure. Government said we will present only in the strategic sector. In the non-strategic sector, either we will sell off the assets or we will merge with the one company with the other companies. Okay, this is what they said. Okay, these are the certain strategic sector where we will present. In the other sectors, Niti Aayog will recommend, okay, those companies, then we will sell off the assets in those things. So then what is this significance? Since it is analysis, we have to talk about the significance. Okay, this will help us to finance our national infrastructure pipeline, which needs 111 lakh crores, right? Then this finance and this money will also help us to invest in the times where there is a less demand, where there is actually no investment from the private sector. This will help us to revive the economy when the economy is in the downturn. For investing in the economy to encourage the spending. Okay, for recovery, now government has huge amount of debt, especially during the time of the COVID. Okay, the government debt has risen to as high as 86%. Now it has again come back to somewhere around 65%. That is also important. What kind of debt the government has? Is it sustainable or not? Okay, so to reduce the government debt is also important. Okay, and to finance the social programs like health and education, we have said government needs investment on the health sector up to at least of 3 to 4%. Now government is doing only 2%. From where the money can come? Okay, now if you do the disinvestment here, use that money to fund the education and the health sector. Okay, so that is the thing. So if you let's say if this is not happening, if your company is making losses, so over a period of time the losses will be huge and no one will be able to take those assets. Okay, so that is also the erodability of the profit will also happen, rapid erosion of the value of the public assessments. Now what are the arguments against the disinvestment? It is like you are using whatever the assets you have for the short term purposes. Okay, let's say you want to buy some bike and you are selling your assets like say gold. Okay, in that way. Okay, let's say you are using that for some kind of education purposes, it is fine. But for the short term gains, if you sell off your assets, it will be a problem in the long term. Now what is the objective of the public sector? Always it is a social objective, like I have also already mentioned. Private sector will not be willing to invest in certain areas. If the government is not present, it can lead to the monopoly. Let's say during the time of farm laws, what was the why the people opposed it? The people said, okay, if the government withdraws from this area without proper regulation, if these APPSC mandis are left by the government, now the private sector will cause a monopoly, will create the monopoly. So presence of private public sector is also very important to bring some kind of competition, to bring some kind of to check the monopoly practices of the private sector. So people are criticizing this thing. Let's say during the time of 1990s, getting the landline phone connection was very difficult. Okay, so but that at that time private sector allowing the private sector has played a role. Okay, by inviting the private sector, the technology was introduced and more competition was introduced, and better products were given to the people. Okay, so government says that we are not needed. Okay, so these people can do. Okay, we will invest in those areas where our presence is needed. Okay, so that is the point, using the funds for the short term purposes. Unequal comparison. Okay, and one more thing is the private we are comparing public sector with the private sector, but private sector is given more tax incentives. Okay, this is what it says. Effective tax rate for the central public sector undertakings for 30%, but while for the private sector it is only 19%. So you cannot say that you cannot compare the public sector with the private sector. Then there is job loss also will happen. Now let's say we sell off our Vishaka steel plant. Okay, there are so many people dependent on it for the livelihood. So that's why there are also people protests. There will be job loss, there will be people protest, and also there can be a possibility of the monopolies happening by the private sector. And also one more thing is, how do you while selling the asset, there is also some kind of brand value. Okay, let's say you sell off the railways, privatization. That railway itself has some kind of brand. Okay, it is very difficult to exactly quote particular value. Okay, they are bringing some kind of exact value is very difficult, and in these cases favoritism and nepotism can also happen. Government might give the prices at the throwaway prices, or it's at the less cost government can give to the private sector. So this is also a kind of problem. So identifying the right price itself is very difficult. The process itself is very difficult. Even this thing is if it is identified, okay, then there can be a kind of scenario where private sector might not be willing to take to buy the government asset at such a higher prices. Okay, if the private sector is not coming forward, like say if you see the disinvestment target from the last few years, it is government will keep high disinvestment target, but over a period of time government is not able to achieve those targets, because private sector is not coming. So what happens is, over a period of time, your assets will become valueless. No one will buy your assets. So your assets will lose its value. So these are certain kinds of threats that is present in the favoritism processes asset valuation. Okay, so what should be the conclusion? Disinvestment is a crucial instrument for fostering economic development and prosperity in India. It needs careful and calibrated approach is needed for the disinvestment. Okay.